So how do you pronounce your last name?
The best that I can do is Poirier.
Poirier. Now, is that Poirier doesn't have the W after the P sound, which is the way that it might be pronounced in typical French? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it probably is, but I don't want to say this many words of French, but I speak like about that many words. Uh,
Okay.
so, so I've heard people pronounce it, I'll call it properly, and it sounds really sexy. And no matter what I try, I can't make it sound like that. So I say it what I consider to be the very English way. And I'm in an English community, and there's like a French community 20 minutes away, which is where my family's from. But in the English speaking community, everybody pronounces it Poirier, the exact same way I did.
Instead of Poirier.
Exactly. There you go. How you just
Ah,
pronounced it is how, if I go into the French community, that's how they say it. But in the English community, which is where I'm at all the time, it's Poirier, just like really flat.
so you're Canadian then?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Okay. Is there some sort of a rivalry between the French speaking Canadians and the English speaking Canadians in your primary language?
There's not here where I live, which is, we call it Acadian French, and it's like where I live, it's like 15 minutes, like I say, away is where my family's originally from, but I've never lived there, but that's where it started. But then there's Brunswick in Canada. That's a totally different French community. And there's a bit more of a rivalry. But when it comes to, say, Quebec French and Acadian French, there's a much bigger rivalry. So
Ah,
it depends on, and I would say Quebec French would tell Acadian French they're not speaking proper French.
very interesting. So Quebec French is more like France French, and Acadian French is the French that came down to the southern United States where they call it Cajun. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct as a person that doesn't speak a whole lot of French. So I believe that's my understanding of it. But of course, I can't back that up by any understanding myself of which one sounds more like each other. But yeah, that's my understanding of it.
Wow. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the moniker you've given yourself, and also it correlates to your website address. It's called That Speaker Guy. How did you give yourself that name, that moniker?
So well, I was going to say I would love to take credit for it, but it's probably cooler if I don't, because in the sense that it actually was kind of, okay, I'll say it was bestowed upon me in a way. What happened was I would go to events all the time and people would say, "Oh, I know you. You're that speaker guy." And after enough people did it, what happened was I kind of said, maybe there's something there. Maybe I need to start embracing it if everybody else is saying it. And then it kind of filtered its way through a lot of the different things I did, because I have a website called The Speaking Program. My book website for my last book is thisistobook.com. Like, it's all like about the one, like the speaker, or that speaker guy is the one speaker guy. And so I think it's all been kind of built around, this is the one you need to go with because it's the one. It's almost like he or she is the person that wrote the book on it. It's
Right.
like it'd be like saying, well, I'll give you a great example, the dog whisperer. So Cesar Millan, by having that brand, you think he's the main dog whisperer. There might be other ones, but he's the one. And so people kept saying it, and eventually I embraced it. And then somehow it filtered its way through everything else I started doing as well.
Now, how long have you been on the speaker circuit and writing about speaking in your books and also through articles?
So 2002 was my first year as a part-time speaker. And I did a couple of years, I'll call it as a side hustle, where I was working in the corporate world and it was kind of the side passion that I was doing. And I was in sales for 10 years, corporate sales. And I made my way to a software sales position. It was a 1-year contract. They wanted me to sign a second year, but they wanted me to move to a totally different place. So actually from Prince Edward Island in Canada to California. That's a pretty big jump. Actually, sorry, I'll correct that. I was in Halifax, Nova Scotia at the time. And they wanted me to move, but I'd been building this little speaking business that wasn't big enough yet, but I didn't want to let it go. And so I decided not to renew the contract. And then I went full time. And so that's just slightly over 20 years ago.
Wow. So you've been speaking full time, and that's your primary occupation for over 20 years now.
Yes, and I have to go one
Uh,
step further. Yes, and the last 4 years and a bit, it's become I still think it's the same, but it's a little different. It's become a bit less of the full-time occupation as we launched a thing called Blue Tops, which BLU stands for Business Life Universe. I always say it's like if Chicken Soup met TedX and they got married and had a baby, we'd be the baby. Well, that launched about 4 years ago. And so I've been building that brand for basically 4 years and then just taking speaking gigs if they were really perfect ones, like the perfect one for me. So I have to say, probably the full time only speaking was about 17 years, but I'm still speaking at our own events. I'm still doing all this stuff. It's just we also have this other brand that's actually bigger now than my speaking business was.
Oh, is that right? So what is that primarily focusing on?
It's kind of, I mean, this is how I say it's quite similar, if not, I don't want to say it's the exact same because it's not. It's quite similar. Basically, what we've done is we created this platform, and I'll actually really platforms, but platform where we highlight people, we get them on prestigious stages. So we run our events at places like Columbia University, Cambridge, Oxford. And so we get people to be able to speak on that epic stage. We get video of that, so 4K, high quality footage that they can then use as their speaking video for getting clients and bookings. They also can create sizzle and highlight reels out of it. So we actually create the platforms to feature them. Then we rebroadcast it on we're on Apple, Roku, Amazon, Google Play, etc. And then we have a book series, which is like anthology or a compilation book series with 30 authors together. We usually have a big name thought leader that's involved. The books always go to Barnes & Noble and Amazon bestseller status. Then we have a podcast and a virtual stage. So ultimately what we're trying to do is we created those platforms so somebody can come and work with us that maybe is just starting and trying to get through what I did, get paid to speak, let's say full time, or launch a book, or become a coach or a consultant. And what we do is we get them that quick credibility, and they have to really do the stuff. There's no manipulation. But since we're running events at epic places, we're filming their footage, we're rebroadcasting it, it's not abnormal in about 4 months for them to be able to say they were featured on Roku, Amazon Fire, Google Play, etc. For them to have a video of them speaking at a place on site at like MIT, to have a video, or sorry, a flyer of them saying they co-authored a book with, let's say, Dr. Joe Vitale or late Bob Proctor, and then a virtual flyer to say they shared the bill with, let's say, Les Brown or Lisa Nichols. I mean, these things took me 15 and a half, 16 years. And we're seeing our clients get that 3 or 4 months. But the end result is now I always kind of jokingly say they become almost like the Oscar winners of their business or industry, because now when you see all those things, you're like, oh, I can trust them. Look at how much they've been vetted. So we help them get that credibility much quicker, but it's all real deal stuff. Like they have to show up and speak. They have to have a video we can actually edit and it looks okay. They have to deliver the chapter for the book. Like they have to do the work. But it's such a big shortcut compared to what I did. So that's what I'm doing now is basically building that company and trying to scale that company.
It sounds like you've evolved from primarily being a speaker to now being a producer of helping others get into the realm of doing the speaking circuit or the author circuit or the presentation media type circuit. Would that be correct?
That would be absolutely correct. So much so that we added another component a year ago called the Blue Talks Experts Bureau. And so what that is we're actually getting speakers booked. But on top of that, we also get people booked on media. Like, so we can get people on ABC or NBC, help them land their TEDx talk. So it is all of those things. And so, yeah, I would say in a lot of ways, we are both a producer of experts and speakers, but also almost like similar to a PR firm, it's a speakers bureau in the sense that we're trying to represent them and get them out to the world as well.
Right. That's what it sounds like to me. Now, prior to you getting into this particular stage of your career, when people would hire you to do public speaking for them, in what realm or specialty were you?
So one of the things I tried to do is I always realized you have to stand out if you want to get hired. And I mean, I know that sounds like basic 101, but what I found is a lot of speakers would say, well, I speak on how to create abundance. I speak on customer service. And my answer to that, and it's not a negative, I'm meat and potatoes, grew up in a small, tiny little town. But my answer to that always is, you know what? You and 1,000 other speakers, probably more than that, speak on that topic. So what makes you different? Why am I going to hire you versus someone else? So what I try to do with my talks is show people why me versus somebody else. So that sets the tone to say one of my talks, I had 3 signature talks. One was called Getting Standing Ovations from Every Customer. But the premise, what made it unique is it was a customer service talk, and it's based on what does Apple do? What does Disney do? What do these companies do that allow them to charge so much more than other places and have more clients? But then I also mixed it with what do stand-up comics do? What do musicians do to be able, like, what do the Rolling Stones do to be able to sell $500 tickets when the local cover band can't charge $5 at the door? And
Right,
then
right,
I tied it into business because I came from a business background. And what does a local staple store do? And so you see where I'm getting at here, but I merged the three of them. So I merged business, small business, and then the entertainment world. And that's where the premise of standing ovations. So the idea was, what can you do to get a standing ovation from a guy standing in front of you at Staples, a customer standing in front of you to buy a piece of equipment? What can you do to get a standing ovation, even if it's figurative? And so that was different because I came from a background of stand-up comedy, music, and business. So I merged the two. So that was one of my talks. Another one was called The Timeless Secrets of Influential Leaders. Again, I tried to go with what made me different. And what makes me, I think, quite different is I don't know many other speakers that I've interviewed upwards of 8,000 people one-to-one. And so my talk was on what are the top 5 things I've learned during that mega research. Because, 8,000, I think that's more homes than Nielsen uses to study rating for TV. And so I
right.
did an exhaustive study and I've come up with, like, let's just say as an example, top achievers say no 20 to 50 times more than everybody else. So then I'll dive into that. That will be one of the, let's say, principles or insights I've learned. And then my third talk was called Reading and Adjusting to Personality Types. And it's, if you've heard of the Myers-Briggs, which is, it's more extensive, but there's the Personality Plus, which is like 4 personality types. Well, what I did was I went in and talked about that, but what made it different again was I focused only on sales. So if you're in a sales role, if you're a real estate agent and you're sitting across from a husband and wife, and one's what I call a yellow, which is social and talkative, and then the other person's red. They're very quiet. They're all about what's in it for us, what's going to make the decision. I want to teach somebody how to adjust to both of those. That couple sitting in front of them. So mine was focused on sales, whereas most personality type sessions are on hiring. So those are my
Right.
3 signature talks.
Well, that's very interesting that you're able to do that. It's difficult to do a speaking engagement and also have it be a learning experience for your audience, isn't it?
It is, and there's a great word that came along that people quote called edutainment, and the idea was you can be entertaining, you can be motivational if you want to call it that, you can be all those things, but you can actually still teach. And to be honest, for myself, that was my positioning. Like I didn't want to be the guy that went in and made you, because I believe you motivate somebody, but it doesn't mean they're going to take action. So I
Right.
believe that for me, I wanted people to walk away with something they could use tomorrow. And
Yeah.
I believe if you go watch Tony Robbins is classified as a motivational speaker. But if you go there, you're going to get things that you can use the next day. So to me, that at most I would say is also an educational speaker. I went to Tony Robbins' event one time and I was in sales and he gave this idea to us. He said, what I want is a real estate conference. And he said, what I want you to do is sell a pen to the person on the right side of you. And I want you to think about the best day of your life, the wedding, when you had your child, what have you. Sell the pen. Now I want you to turn to the person on your left. Think of the worst day of your life, when you lost somebody you loved or what have you. And then what he got us to do is he got the person that we sold it to tell us when we were selling on the best day of our life, what did they notice about us? And then on the worst day, what did you notice? The best day, your chest was out, you were speaking higher, you were smiling. The worst day, you were slumped. And so what it made me realize is I could go into a sales call back then and just think about the best day of my life before I walked to the door and have a better sales call. What I'm saying is that's actually something I could use. That's just not just motivational. So it's hard to do, but that's what I strived to do when I started doing talks. Is I wanted to be the guy that you could walk away and have 3 things you could start doing tomorrow.
A long time ago, I had a company called Great Interviews, and I helped people learn how to engage with the camera, how to respond to questions, and things along those lines that would help them be better in this kind of a scenario. It sounds like you and I both have revolved around helping people become better communicators. And that sounds like what your life's goal has really been in a kind of quiet way. Is that true?
It's true, but I'm glad you articulated it that way, because I've said over the years, like people say, what's your mission? And I would say to help people communicate a message that can change the world and stuff. So I'm aware that a lot of my life has been built around communication, but I never really, I know it is true what you said, but I never really thought of it from that perspective. I always thought about it like my mission statement says to be the guy who motivates, donates, educates, inspires, and entertains. But as far as helping people through communication, I know I've been doing that my whole life. I never really thought about how centered that is in what I'm actually doing. To the point where, yeah, it's like everything is built around that. Now, the reason I knew communication is such a big part of my life is I started realizing early on, and I was doing stand-up comedy, playing music. And when you're playing music, early on when I started, I was like playing in front of the mic. I was nervous, hardly talking to the audience. Then I started doing comedy. Then I started speaking. And then years later, I'm playing music and I'm storytelling and saying, it's how the song came about. And I had people say, oh my God, the songs are good, but dude, you're a storyteller. Like it was like I was immersed in what the song was about. And I realized that I thought they were all separate. And I was even saying, like, I'm so scattered. Why am I not focused on one thing? And then I realized, oh my gosh, everything I'm doing is communication. Even writing books is communication. And writing articles is communication, radio interviews. And I didn't realize that until a number of years ago. But until you just said it, I didn't realize how big a part it's also playing in me helping other people.
I have a friend who was originally a guest here on this show. She's an ER doctor and she wants to get onto the speaking circuit. So she's just beginning her career with that. And she's a wonderful speaker, totally knowledgeable about all different situations related to health and medicine and keto and diet, nutrition, and all of that. One of the things that she expressed was that it takes a lot of time for her to get her look right, to apply the makeup, to get the hair, to choose the right outfit. Is that more important for her or women more so than men? Or is it just something that all speakers need to pay attention to?
Here's where it gets interesting. I think it's important, but I think as important, and it also connects to it, is figuring out what your brand is and being that brand, let's say as a speaker when you get on the stage. So why do I say it like that? We went to this event, this is wild, that same learning annex I mentioned with Tony Robbins, and this is like 18 years ago. It was a long time ago. I barely even speaking then. And this guy came out and he was a bigger guy and he had this big white shirt and he had like mustard stains on it. And he, as far as selling from the stage, he sold more than anybody in that entire room, other than maybe like Tony Robbins and whoever else was the big names. And the guy that was on the stage with him said, "This is him every day." And he was hilarious. And so you overlooked him. And then you go to, say, Gary Vaynerchuk, if you've heard of him. Gary Vaynerchuk can walk in with a hole in his shirt and a ball cap on and get paid $120,000 to speak for 45 minutes. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think it's most important we know what our brand is and pay attention to that than it is us kind of thinking, I got to look good for my audience.
Kind of an interesting thing you've just explained, because it's always some sort of a nexus between style and substance, isn't it? Vaynerchuk can come out looking like a schlub and get his message across because people dig what he says. Other people have to come out and maybe they're not as well known and they have to kind of look good because you need to have the people accept you before they start to listen to you, right? Do you remember when Vaynerchuk was doing wine reviews? That was long before he built his reputation as any sort of an influencer or cosmic genius related to business. Well, we're just talking about the whole Gary. Style and substance and Gary Vaynerchuk and things like that. Like he can get away with looking however he does because he's built his reputation. Before he became a t-shirt wearing, baseball cap wearing guy who dropped F-bombs all the time, he had to kind of present himself in a different way, a little bit more sophisticated way, even though he was real the whole time. But you have to have your audience accept you before you can become authentic. Do you know what I mean?
I do. And yeah, I remember what I wanted to mention too. I remember watching Gary one time and he had, I think it was like, I want to say a family member, it might've been his mother or father on one day. And the next day he had Wayne Gretzky on. And to me, that summed up his show as well. Like it was like, he didn't view it like, he made it special, but he didn't go, okay, well, it's always going to be Wayne Gretzky or it's always going to be my family. And I thought even that was different than what I was used to, because most people would only bring on the big names or what have you. And he did that with his family mixed with big celebrities and friends. And my understanding is when he finished Wine Library TV, he was getting about 80,000 viewers a day, which is pretty significant from starting from the ground up.
Oh, yeah. I'm curious, Corey, you must have seen that I was looking for guests. And so you pitched me. I'm just wondering what it was about me or my show that kind of moved you to want to say, hey, Matthew, would you like to have me on? Here's what I've done. This is what I do. And all of that. I'm always curious to know what attracted you to this program.
So first and foremost, it's wild, but it's actually the name. I like it pulled me in, and I think you probably hear that often, but it pulled me in as something that It felt familiar because it's a name that's kind of a play off something's familiar, but also really pulled my attention in. And I guess what I did was I started listening to the conversations, and I realized it was real, authentic conversations. And I think that's what I crave. And I believe that's what a lot of people crave more than anything else. So I feel it was like the name first pulled me in. And then it was listening to some of the conversations you were having and saying, wow, like these are authentic conversations, unlike what we're hearing on every show now. Not every show has. So I think those were the two biggies.
Oh, that's good. It's always nice to know why, right?
Absolutely.
What is your family life like as far as do you have a wife or a partner or kids or pets? And what's a little bit of the backstory on Corey and what you're doing?
Yeah, so yes to all. So we have two kids, a 7 and a 4-year-old. We have two cats, both brother and sister, both 16. And we have a little 2-year-old dog. Well, he's not little anymore. He's gained too much weight, but a 2-year-old Pomeranian named Lego. The kids named him, obviously. I shouldn't say obviously, but they did. And then I have a wife, common law wife. We haven't gotten officially married, but we're common law, and we've been together. We're just about to hit 10 years. And so that's kind of what my life looks like now. So insert the word busy. And at the same time, add another layer to it. My wife just finished going through a double mastectomy. And wow. She's right now healing and about to start some treatment. And so add to the busy of what I just said, and then compound it by 3. So
right. So yeah, you take the busy and then you add in the real and the most serious and most important, right?
Absolutely. I don't think I mentioned it, but I have a book called The Enlightened Passenger, and we're in talks with a producer. We're actually going to sign on probably this week for them to turn it into a feature film. And we met them at the Emmys. So that was part of why we went there. And we have a documentary we're working on to get finished that we're doing with the same producer. So then the Grammys and Oscars will be important because we'll also meet a lot of people we can interview for our show, but also some of them might be a good fit for the documentary.
Speaking of entertainment, what streaming shows have you been watching together that you've enjoyed lately?
Okay, so this is kind of goes to the point of how much our habits have changed too. So the big thing we've been watching lately is Hot Ones. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, the hot
First We
sauce
Feast?
show,
Yeah.
First We Feast with Sean. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've been watching that quite a bit. So we've been watching like that in the last probably month. We've watched that more consistently than anything else. Now it's really, it's on YouTube, but it's also, I think it's on Prime or something now too. But on YouTube, you can watch every episode since it started. So, but what's wild is we watch that on our TV. Like it's so fascinating. I don't know if you've ever heard of that one with Rob Dyrdek. It's like America's Funniest Videos, slightly for adults. Like there's no vulgar or anything, but it's like people like, America's Funniest Videos was like the comical things that would happen. What else have I been watching lately? I watch Impractical Jokers. Have you ever heard of that show?
I have heard of that. I haven't seen it though.
They're 4 guys from New York that have been playing pranks on each other since they were little kids. And they've had a show out now for like 11 or 12 seasons. That's kind of the rundown, basically.
Gotcha. Now, I know you're living in Canada. You seem to come to the USA quite a lot. Will you be celebrating Thanksgiving, our Thanksgiving, which is different than the Canadian Thanksgiving?
For me, the way I usually work is it depends where I'm at the time. So if I were in the US, which I'm not going to be this Thanksgiving, if I were in the US, then yes. If I'm, to be honest, life is always so busy. If I'm home, then I don't, because it's like out of sight, out of mind. And I say that, by the way, I want to clarify, if I was in the US during our Thanksgiving, it would be the same deal. Like it's out of sight, out of mind. So I don't celebrate it if I'm not in a place where it's really happening. Like it's not being celebrated. If I'm home and it's not happening locally, I'm not hearing anybody talk about it. It's a bit different, really.
The through line on a lot of the holidays is the food. So that dovetails to my next question for you, which is, what have you eaten today?
Wow, today. So I'm a snacker or a grazer, whatever you want to call that. So it's a big list, but I'll give you the highlight is I just finished off mangoes, like dry, whatever they are, dry mangoes. I don't know what you call it. Dried mangoes. Yeah. So dried mangoes. I'm not by choice, but I'm gluten-free. And I say not by choice because I went gluten-free by choice for a year, decided to start adding some gluten in, and my body said, no, I'm not taking that anymore. And now I literally can't. So most of what I eat is gluten-free. So I had butter chicken for lunch, but it was in one of like the prepackaged butter chicken. And
gotcha.
So I'm near a Subway restaurant, so often I'll go there and get like you can get a salad there with all the veggies and then certain chicken that they have that's gluten free. So that would be either of the two or sushi. That's my three go to during the day when I'm at the office. But butter chicken was today. So I had butter chicken. I had the mangoes. I had one kind bar, and then earlier this morning, I had a I forget what you call it, but anyway, it's like a chocolate bar, but like a rich type chocolate. And then when I wake up, I usually have forget what it's called, but it's like gluten free, et cetera free cereal. It's the only kind of cereal I can pretty much eat, but I love cereal, and so I have it with either regular milk or almond milk. But that was, I think, I'm sure I forget. I also had a plum and an apple.
That's quite a nice selection of goodies.
I try, and then I try to drink what they say is alkaline water, but I still don't know if it's, if the fact that it's in a bottle, a plastic bottle, helps or hinders it. Meaning, like, they say it's alkaline, but being in the bottle for as long as it transports, I think I'm like 50-50. Like, it's better than if I wasn't drinking water, but yeah, I got to work on that and start. When I'm traveling, I take the big, thick plastic bottles. But when I'm here, I end up sometimes falling back to these, but all I ever drink is water.
It's so funny that people choose to drink alkaline water out of plastic as if, the whole microplastics thing doesn't cancel out the fact that it's an alkaline. And,
that's why I pointed that out. I mean, right. I think it's probably better than, not a knock on them, I guess, but I know Pepsi and Coke each make their own water, and it's not alkaline. I'm thinking this might be slightly better than that, but it's only probably marginally better. It would still be much better if I was doing the alkaline at home.
Now, your choice to be gluten-free, is that because wheat bothers your system? Do you get hives and all that kind of thing?
I don't get external, it's internal. So the best way I can say it is that I've had 4 flare-ups in the last year, and they're memorable enough that I know it's 4. The last one was 2 weeks. Now we're talking, so to put that in perspective, not the whole time, but a big part of the time, I can't sleep the whole night, and it's a stabbing pain. That part's not the whole time, but it's pretty intense, and it's not being able to sleep. And the irony is, the last time I had it, the day it subsided mostly was the day I was delivering my TedX. So what that tells you is my last TedX. So what that tells you is I had it dealing with it the whole time I was getting ready for my TedX, and that wasn't fun. And I was in the hotel room for 3 days, and it felt like it was 4 years because I was in so much pain, dark in that room. And, for lack of a better way of saying it, I won't go into any more detail than this, other than to say, what I realized is it's about having a movement after you eat wheat to get past. And because I couldn't eat hardly anything because it was killing me, I wasn't getting enough to do that. So finally I did a thing called Restore Relax. And I tried it at first for 3 days and gave up twice. And this was in that 2 weeks. And finally I said, you know what, I'm just going to take it until it happens. And it was 5 days, and then it passed. But basically, to answer your question, it's like stabbing pains in my side the whole time.
So primarily then you've given up bread for the most part. That would be the absolute largest gluten containing product. Yeah.
It would. The good news for me is I never was much of a big bread eater. So that's the good news. And there are honestly some decent, I want to say good, I'll say decent gluten-free breads. I have found there's really good gluten-free bagels. I mean, I would honestly eat like 3 bagels a year, whether I could eat gluten or not, but every now and then I like one, and I've found really good locally, really good gluten-free bagels, but bread is still the challenge. I mean, right. I think like people like, that's the good part of bread is the gluten. And so, yeah, it's not by choice. Bread, I've had to eliminate for the most part. Pasta, to some degree, but again, there's lots of good pasta that's gluten-free. Bread is, I will say, it's always the hard one. It's like going to get a burger and trying to get a bun that's worthwhile eating with the burger. Mostly I end up eating a lettuce wrap, but right. I found Wahlburgers. I used to go like through the airport, the US side of the airport, there's a Wahlburgers, and I used to love it. They had the best tasting bun I could find on a gluten-free burger. Anyway, the last 2 times I was there, they said, no, we got rid of that. But anyway, yeah, that was the best one I could find.
Oh, that's interesting, because a lot of people have sensitivities and issues. So it's always good to be able to get something that is going to be edible for you and maybe close to being adequate, right?
Yeah, that's the key thing, close to being adequate. I mean, right. It's enough that I just kind of usually don't have bread because I wasn't a big bread person anyway. If a person posed the question, what do you miss the most? For me, it's cheesecake And there's still some, but if you go to like, what's it called? I always get confused because in Canada, there was the cheesecake. I think it's the factory, right? In the US, Cheesecake Factory.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
there's Cheesecake Cafe was in Canada. Either one, if you go to, there's like 80 cheesecakes and 2 are gluten-free. And so it's a very slim pickings. So that's been a challenge, especially cheesecake. And then the secondary one is I'm a big pizza guy. The good news is most pizza places are now starting to have gluten-free, but it's still, it's still just not the same. So those are my two
Right.
misses. I miss these two things dramatically, is cheesecake and pizza. In fact, if both of those things didn't have gluten in the first place, and let's say I'll add one more, I'm a big seafood guy. So if battered fish didn't have gluten, I wouldn't even care. Those are the three things that make it a little hard for me.
Well, I can maybe help you out being a chef. You like battered fried fish and so on. What you can use is chicharrones and crush them up and use that as your coating. And all that is pork rinds. And that makes a wonderful coating for fish if you're gluten sensitive. Did you ever know that?
I didn't. And I'm going to re-listen to this back because I didn't make a note, but I'm going to make a note, or I'll reach out and ask you the name.
Oh, yeah. Anytime you need any help with food. And that goes for anyone watching us right now. And then the cheesecake thing, it's such a small part of it is gluten. You could make a keto style gluten free cake without any wheat whatsoever. Just get that tangy, creamy, cheesy, delicious kind of thing that you miss. So you don't have to, through life missing out on some of your favorite food.
Well, and to that point, I don't eat the crumbs, the bread part. That's not even my jam with cheesecake. My thing is the cheesecake itself, so I know that's a big part of like New York cheesecake and stuff, that bottom layer, but I'm okay without that. And I know that's the only really hard part, I think, with the gluten is that piece.
Yeah, then you can eat the cheese and all the filling and leave the crust in the dust.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. Yeah, I like that. Leave the crust in the dust. That'd be a name of a good cookbook, I think.
It would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think a lot of people who are watching you right now would be people who have experienced stage fright in the past. They want to be speakers, but they have this stage fright thing. Is that something you experience? And if so, how do you help people overcome that?
Yes. And yes. So I experienced it to the tune that I was originally, I wanted to be a writer. So like screenwriter, playwriter, book writer. I told my mom early on, I didn't read my first book till age 27. And I told her I wanted to be a book writer. And she said, I think you have to read one first. And she was right. But I wanted to be a writer. I didn't want to be on stage. So I had that stage fright thing we're talking about. So much so that like the first time I talked, I don't remember what I said. People said, I don't know what you're saying up there, but you sure were passionate saying it. And so I have videos of me like with thick hair covered in sweat. Like I had to really push through it. So I totally get it. And I had it as well. And I still, if I were going to do stand-up comedy tonight, after a break of say 6 months, I would have it again. And I still have it every now and then, depending on the talk. So first of all, yes, I had it. And again, still get it. And then as far as helping people, usually what I tell people, couple of things. One, to recognize that it's usually not a fear of rejection or what's going to happen on the stage. It's the fear of not knowing what's going to happen on the stage. So it's the unknown more than it is I'm going to get heckled or booed. And so the best way often to get past that is to know your talk inside and out. Mm-hmm. So your unknown is what's going to happen if I go up there. Well, if you go up there and you know your talk and you plan for what if it goes wrong? What if somebody heckles me? What will I say? And if you have that locked in place, then that takes away some of the unknown. So that's the first part. So that's just really knowing your talk. The second piece is to recognize you're not going up there for you. You're going up there to impact somebody's life in front of you. Now, in comedy, you could be just going up there so that they forget about their day. You want to entertain them. But in speaking, you might be going up there because you want to take something away from their day or get them motivated or get them smiling or what have you. So if you go up, and here's what I do, I think about a testimonial somebody gave me, like somebody reached out and said, thanks, that talk changed my life. That's who I think about before I start speaking. So when I'm about to walk up the stage, I think about a testimonial somebody gave me. And then what I think is that next person, just like them, is going to be out there tonight. And I can't make this about me and be internal. I need to make it about everybody here. And those are the two things that help me regularly pass stage fright.
That's very interesting. If you imagine your audience all sitting on the potty while you're giving your speech, somehow there's an energy that makes you feel more confident. Did you ever hear that?
I did. I mean, I heard it's the same thing of, picturing everybody naked, same concept.
Yeah.
And I've heard it. I've never tried it. I've heard it, yeah. The only thing I can say is, I'm sure it has worked for people. There has almost everything. There's a little bit of a grain of truth to it. Like somebody must have done that, and it must have worked for them. But for me, yeah, I haven't tried it, and I don't even know what that would look like. And and then you have the other joke of there's some audience members you might not want to see, with no clothes on, and there's some you might really want to see with no clothes on. But I've never tried that. I think for me, it would probably be more distracting than anything else. Like just trying to visualize and going, oh, and look, I haven't tried it.
It's interesting that in comedy, you're working for laughs. And when you're doing a public speaking engagement, you're working for either connection or communication or having your information land. It's a little bit nuanced, but the payoff is different in each one of those scenarios, right?
It sure is. And in fact, that's how I made my way into speaking in the first place. Is I was doing comedy, and by the way, comedy was the best learning ground you could ever have for becoming a communicator. So I'm so glad it was part of my path. But one of the comics actually invited me to a Tony Robbins event. He got free tickets somehow. Somebody in his office couldn't use them. And I went, and we were sitting there, and he goes, "Can you believe he's making," and he's hit me, "Can you believe he's making this much money to do this?" And I said, it was like a record scratch mode. I'm like, people get paid to do this? We're going to the comedy club, and I'm paying like $5 in gas to pick up 10 comics and getting paid $10 from the door, heckling. People are drinking while they're there. It's nighttime and everything else. And you mean I could be doing this during the daytime? People want to hear my message and would pay. And so that was really the idea of the difference was what kind of pushed me to at least explore it. And to answer your question, yeah. So for me, I look at it like with comedy, whether I have a bad night or a good night, or I'm a train wreck or not, I'm helping somebody escape their day. Because if I'm train wrecking and they're laughing at me and not with me and everything else, they're still forgetting that they have a bill to pay that they can't pay right now. So I looked at it like I was helping them get out of their head. With speaking, I'm looking more at impact, influence. How can I maybe change the way they think? How can I change their life in some way? It's definitely a different outcome that I'm looking for.
Right. Are there a couple of different points when you're doing public speaking do you like to incorporate humor into your speeches? Do you do self-deprecating kind of material so people can start to feel like, yeah, he is real, and then they can plug into you a little bit more that way?
Again, another yes and yes. So I tend to do like the self-deprecation. It's in the moment. Like I don't think, okay, I'm going to say this, or I could say this, and it'll make them endear them to me. I also add in sometimes humor that is planned. So, and usually what I would say to people, speakers especially, if you're going to try humor, test it and then test it again, because different audiences, first of all, what you think is humorous to one audience could actually be offensive to another. Like there's a lot of variables. So the one, for example, that I sometimes will open a talk with is the first night I performed stand-up comedy, I didn't realize the mic wasn't turned on. And so there's a whole joke about how I told two jokes, got no laughs. Finally, the guy calls me over and says, "You idiot, we haven't even turned the mic on yet." And it always gets a good laugh in a corporate audience. So I know it's sort of tested and tried. Well, I will use that. And the finish to that is always saying, I didn't have my mic turned on. So then earlier maybe in the talk, I'll tap the mic and say, "Can everybody hear me okay? Do I have the mic on?" And it seems amateurish, but when I do that thing about the comedy, then I'll say, "Now you know why I asked if my mic was turned on." And so I bring it full circle, but it's definitely comedy. And the self-deprecation, of course, in that case is I got no laughs. So then I could leave it at that, which really you could say is not really self-deprecation because the mic wasn't turned on. Well, people would always ask me, what happened after the mic got turned on? So eventually what I realized is I could have a fallback so that if that first mic not turned on didn't get a laugh, I can keep going. And that's smart too. Have a backup plan. So if the first one doesn't get a laugh, then you go to the second one. If the first one gets an amazing laugh, you leave off the second one. So that way you have a backup. But with the mic turned on, what I would tell people is we got the mic turned on, we set everything back up. I told the same two jokes and they bombed again. And I then say, I think I'm the only comic in history to bomb with the same material twice in 10 minutes. And so then it becomes a self-deprecation times 2, really.
It's always good to have that kind of stuff in your arsenal to be able to enjoy with your audience, right?
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. So what are some of your next things that are coming up? I know we're, approaching the holidays and so on, but what are your next big things related to your career happening now?
So I mentioned the new book is out, The Enlightened Passenger. Like I said, this is what she looks like.
Nice. Better than The Dark Passenger.
Yeah, 100%. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a fictional parable, two people on a plane, old person, young
Uh,
person, and basically it's a flight. They call the flight that changes everything. The older person shares 10 life lessons with the younger person. That's as far as I'll go, but I'll just say, and there's a twist in it. But that book, letting the world know it exists is one thing that's right present with me. Also with Blue Talks, we just kind of we're almost to the point of finishing all our 2025 dates, and that's like an event a month. So, Blue Talks getting ready for the new season. The biggest thing, though, of all is the other thing I mentioned earlier, which is this documentary and the feature film thing. Like early in the new year, the plan is if we go to LA and if my wife can attend, we're going to sit in the writing room with it's a mother-daughter producer team, and we're going to basically kind of finalize the storyboards and all that stuff. And her focus, she'd like to get investors on board and it sold to a streaming service in the first 4 months of the year. So that's literally in the next 6 months. So we'll see if that happens. From my end, though, it's, letting people know this documentary and the feature film exists or will exist soon. The book, letting people know they can get a copy right now. And then on top of that, just keeping the Blue Talks train rolling.
well, that sounds like, your plate is full, let's just say.
Yeah, there's today was the first day in probably 4 or 5 months for like about half hour max where I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have like a mounting to-do list that I got to tackle. And then it was like, I got a message on WhatsApp from one of the members of our sales team. And then I was like, oh, I got to jump into that. And so it was short-lived, but that was the first one in probably 3 or 4 months where I could literally just say, oh, I don't have anything pressing right now. So I never get a chance to be bored is the takeaway there.
Oh, good. Well, I'm going to throw in a random question. Tell us about your tattoos.
Oh, wow. So plural. So I have, like, I'm not one of those people that have sleeves or covered or whatever. I have random ones. But I have because I've gotten a few in the last couple of years, I've lost track in terms of what's the exact number, but let's just say, I think it's like 17, but they're all, like I say, some are small or what have you. But the one, if I say the one, I try to have ones that I had my first one when I was really young, younger than you're supposed to. My mother said, if you want to get it and do it to your body, you can. And she called and gave permission, and I was really young. That tattoo, I don't regret. It's more like now, like it's almost like funny. Like it's almost like I won't cover over it because it's hilarious. It's actually the band Poison, the 80s glam band. It's like a skull with their name on it. And so, but after I got a couple of them, the first ones, then I was like, holy, this stuff's going to be on my body for life. This probably should have some meaning behind why I get it. And a friend of mine does tattoos, and he's like, Corey, if I have one more person that walks in the door and asks for eat, pray, love. And the idea is that at the time when the movie was out, everybody's getting that. But really, is that going to mean a whole lot to you like 9 years from now? So almost all mine mean something. Blue, which is our brand, I actually have a blue tattoo, like the logo on my arm. But okay, the one that probably is the most unique story behind it, because they're all sort of meaningful. I have my birth year on, but the one has the biggest probably meaning is on my hand. My wife and I each got a tree of life, and
okay,
she got it on her right hand. I got it on my left. Part of the deal was we're not married, as I mentioned, but we feel like we are, and I've just kind of held off because I have so many friends that got married after never having fights, getting along great, and get divorced right away. And I get something in my head, a block there somewhere, I think. And so I was like, I'll make a bigger commitment. I'll get this on my hand, on my ring finger for you. And so she wanted to get it on her right hand. So if we hold hands, the trees are connected. Make a long story short, why it's significant is we got it from a guy named Corey Miller, who was on the TV show LA Inc. And it took 4 months to get it. And we got the tattoo, and he told her that the reason he finally said yes is he's the tattoo artist for James Hetfield, who's the lead singer of Metallica. And James called him and said, I want a finger tattoo, Corey. Are you up for it? And he goes, well, I got to practice on somebody. So we were the people he practiced on. And then
guinea pig.
Yeah. But what's really epic is I found out later in the 80s music scene, there was a guy named Lemmy from a band called Motorhead. And Lemmy passed away a few years ago. Well, James's tattoo that he got we were being practiced on for, he actually got Lemmy's ashes tattooed into his finger.
Oh, wow.
So it's just this like epic 6 degrees of separation, like a band that I grew up listening to. Now I was being practiced on for the lead singer, and then a band that I followed, his ashes are in that finger that was being practiced on for my, it's kind of like you can't make this stuff up.
So the choice of the tree of life has nothing to do with sacred geometry. It's just a design that you like.
I mean, I think like I have a certain calming energy around the tree of life, and it, the idea of just energy and life and all. There is something there, but it's not as probably thought through as a lot of other people that, that really it's a big symbol to them. To me, it's a symbol of life and creating and life force and energy and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't get into the probably like the theology behind it and the history behind the tree of life and stuff like that. I probably should at some point.
So if your kids were to come up to you in a few years, what did you say their ages were?
7 and 4.
So in 10 years, when the 7-year-old is 17, he said, Dad, I'm going to get some tattoos. What do you think? You're just like all for it?
So it's like I'll just say it's for me, I don't want to say I'm indifferent to it, but it's like I did it. So I feel like I'd be a hypocrite to say you can't do this.
Right.
At the same time, I mean, I probably would at least give some advice like was given to me, like, again, try to make sure it's something that you would really want. Make sure you're going to somebody that's actually either clean or reputable. Like I would try to instill some wisdom, but I don't think if they came home with one that they didn't ask me for, I'm not going to like ground them for 8 years or anything like that.
Right.
But
right.
I don't know. I'll put it this way. I would try not, I would hope it wouldn't be something that they would be doing. So I didn't share it, but I was like 12.
Right. Well, you were saying you were really young before you should have done that.
And it was definitely not something that's normal back then. Like in a little town we were in, it wasn't common. There was a stigma. And here I am at 12, and my cousin then got one a week later because once my mom said yes, then his mother said yes. He was 13, or no, he was 13. So what I'm saying, it was a really young age. I kind of hope my kids don't get it in their head at that age. But again, my mother smoked when she was younger, and then I don't smoke, and I haven't for like 30 years. But I started when I was younger, like really young, and my mother was like, I smoked one time in the room and I left, and it was a cigar and it was still going. And she came home and there was like a hole in the bed. And she said, you could have burned the house down. She said, if you're going to smoke, I don't want you hiding it from me. Smoke in front of me, smoke in the ashtray. And she kind of said, and I said, I can't believe you're letting me do this. She said, well, I started smoking at the same age. I would be hypocritical to try to pretend I didn't. So I'm not saying that's the right way to parent, but that's kind of, for me, it's like, it depends on the circumstance. But if it's something like that, and let's say they're 17 or 18, and let's say that's legal at the age here, then I'm probably not going to fight them too much on it.
Okay. So it sounds like, there are a lot of growing pains in being a parent.
Yes, absolutely.
Because you always have to kind of like harken back to your earlier days and say, oh God, this is the way I was when I was a kid. And now here I've got kids that same age now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. Corey, please tell us where we can get a hold of you, watch your progression and all of that.
So I think if a person, since I referenced the book, if a person wants to grab a copy of the book, it's pretty easy. It's thisisthebook.com. And when you go there, if you, you can select your retailer you want to get it from. But if you keep track of the order number and go back, then we give away a whole bunch of cool bonuses that are all free. So I would say if you're going to buy the book anyway, why not get the free bonuses? So thisisthebook.com is one place to go. And then I would say the other place to go, you can obviously Google my name and go on social media and reach out and say hi. Tell me you heard about me on the show. A lot of the places you'll find me under That Speaker Guy, as we said earlier. The one other place I would send people is probably Corey Poirier Media.com. And that's just a place where you can watch past interviews. You can get a feel for some of the work I do. And the biggest part is all the social media links are there. So it's kind of a shortcut as well.
Oh, good. It's sort of like a link tree, so to speak, for you.
Yeah. I do have a link tree, but I can't think of what the link tree name is.
Thank you so much for joining me today on 50 Tastes of Great. Corey, I hope you had a good time.
I had an absolute pleasure of a time. I thank you so much, Matthew.